Welcome to Youth in the Law. My name is Alicia and we'll be covering the Sammy Yatim trial. On July 27, 2013, Sammy Yatim came on a streetcar armed with a knife. Officer James Forcillo shot him 9 times. James Forcillo was charged with attempted murder, second-degree murder, and manslaughter. He was only found guilty on attempted murder. Today, we're talking with lawyer Ari Goldkind. Thank you, Ari, for coming today.
Pleasure to be with you, Alicia. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about your background.
So I'm a criminal lawyer in Toronto, and most people know that I do defense work, which means if somebody gets charged with a crime, I get called to defend them. And I've been doing that for over a decade now. I also do commentary for different TV stations throughout Canada, talking about legal issues like the Sammy Yatim trial. So I'm looking forward to your questions.
Yeah. So what do you think overall about the Sammy Yatim trial?
Well, from the night that I saw it on the news, I was sort of disgusted with what happened. You had a boy in emotionally disturbed state, which we'll talk about as we go what that means, who was on a streetcar. And, you know, a lot of people started the conversation by saying he had a knife and he threatened some women and he exposed his private part and he sort of deserved what happened. From the night I watched the video, I saw a boy alone on a streetcar, everybody else was off, and a testosterone-filled bully of a police officer shot him 9 times. And this was a boy alone on a streetcar, and at most he was in danger of carving up fabric.
Right.
So to me, it's a tragedy in a complete way, and we'll explain more as we go.
What do you think drove Sammy Yatim to come on that streetcar with a knife?
So that's a very good question, Alicia, because it assumes that people like us who are not emotionally disturbed can often figure out or explain in a perfect way what makes a young man be emotionally disturbed. Now, there was some evidence that he had drugs in his system, ecstasy, for example. But, you know, I know you're young, but a lot of people who take ecstasy, they don't do the things that Sammy Yatim did. So there was something else triggering in his brain in an emotional way that made him act out the way he did. But to me, it was never about why did he act that way. It was never supposed to be a trial about Sammy Yatim, which is what his defense team tried to do, essentially saying that Sammy Yatim had it coming because of what he did. And to me, it should have always remained a trial about the police. We'll never know, because Sammy Yatim's life was taken, what led him to that moment.
Why do you think James Forcillo would shoot him 9 times? I mean, he had a knife. He was far from James Forcillo. Like, he could have just shot him in the leg for all, but he chose to shot him 9 times.
That's right. So let's just go to something you said, which is a bit different of an answer, because even for me, if I wasn't a lawyer, and if I didn't know how police training and police procedures worked, I'd say, why not shoot him in the leg? Just get him down. And same as when we all watch movies, you know, if there's people escaping in a car, you don't shoot them in the head, you shoot the tires so that the car becomes disabled. Police are specifically instructed and trained that when they shoot to kill. So shooting at his leg would not have been an option. However, if we want to keep this as real as possible, the reason James Forcillo shot Sammy Yatim is because James Forcillo was a testosterone-filled, straight from the gym, pumped up, egotistical guy that Sammy Yatim, and this is important, dared to confront or disrespect or not follow his order. And when you have an officer, a young, relatively new officer, and James Forcillo, people don't know, had been flagged by the Toronto police for pulling his gun far more frequently than you're allowed to do on the force. When you say something to a police officer like, "You're a blanking blank," to a police officer who's full of testosterone and thinks he controls the world, that's what led to those 9 shots. And anybody else who explains it differently, in my view, is not keeping it real.
James Forcillo was charged with second-degree murder, attempted murder, and manslaughter, but he only got guilty of attempted murder.
Right.
Why do you think that was?
So just to explain to viewers, he was charged with 2 different things. The manslaughter thing, I'll just explain very quickly. There were 2 sets of shots. The first 3 shots, when Sammy Yatim defied James Forcillo's order to put the knife down. He shot him 3 times. Those 3 bullets all hit Sammy Yatim. They severed his spine. He fell to the ground paralyzed, and he did die from those 3 shots. Those are the second-degree murder charges. We can talk about those if you want. The next shots that he was convicted of for attempted murder is there was a 6-second pause. And once Sammy Yatim was on the ground, dead and dying and paralyzed, James Forcillo then shot him 6 more times. That's what he was convicted of.
Right.
If you're charged with second-degree murder, you can be convicted of manslaughter if a jury says you weren't intending to kill him. The jury gave him a complete free pass on the first 3 shots and said Sammy Yatim essentially deserved what he got.
Right.
That's the part of the story that I hate.
Right. Why do you think that the jury decided to just make him guilty of attempted murder when he did kill Sammy Yatim?
Sure. Let's go through a few reasons that come to my mind. The first is that James Forcillo is a cop. The fact that he's a Toronto police officer, or as we see throughout North America, this is not just a Toronto phenomenon. When you're a police officer, the rules sort of don't apply to you. You can almost beat people with immunity or impunity. You can get caught on videotape on booking videos at police stations. Like if you're arrested and you go into a police station, there's videos recording. They'll still beat somebody up, and if it comes to trial, they'll usually get off because the person said something or the person threatened them. It's really ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the fact that James Forcillo was a police officer, I don't think this jury in Toronto wanted to call him a murderer. The next reason is because if you're going to call it second-degree murder and a jury knows that means life in jail, they might have thought he did wrong but didn't want to call him a murderer. So it may be time that we change the criminal code, that instead of charging a cop in that situation with murder, we have something like excessive or unlawful use of force while acting as a police officer. I think a jury may be more comfortable to convict on that rather than a murderer. The next reason, and this is one that hasn't been talked about enough, is he had a very tough defense lawyer. Very tall, very big, very burly, very confident, very argumentative. That lawyer was really fighting for James Forcillo, whereas the Crown was much more of a meek, mild-mannered, quiet person. And sometimes to a jury, it's 12 human beings. People forget, they're not magical people. They're 12 people straight from the community. That might have said to the jury, why is this lawyer fighting so hard, but the Crown is sort of being really nice? And these are things that all go into it. And the last reason is because even if you think that Sammy Yatim deserved or it was justified that James Forcillo fired the first 3, no human beings, including this jury, could ever come to the justification of why, when there's a boy lying on the ground dying with his spine paralyzed, bleeding out, should an officer then shoot him 6 times. So even the jury, as tough as it was for them, it took them about 6 days. They came back, and that's the attempted murder charge, just so people understand which of the gunshot rounds we're talking about.
Right. Do you think it was wrong that they decided that he wasn't, that because he was a police officer, he shouldn't be in jail for the rest of his life? Like, do you think he should have been charged with being guilty of it?
If you look at the criminal code, which as it stands right now is a system of laws that applies to us all, you don't get a free pass or a get out of jail free card when it says you're a policeman. To me, James Forcillo got away with murder. This was a murder on a streetcar. It's on YouTube, it's on Google, anybody could watch it. As I said in the beginning of our talk, this was a boy alone on a streetcar. There was no attempt, and the word that's being talked about a lot in Toronto now is to de-escalate. So if you have somebody that's not well or mentally ill, you don't start by shooting them.
Right.
You offer them a drink. You say, is there anything I can do? You maybe taser them, as much as I'm not a fan of tasering. This was a man who murdered Sammy Yatim, and if he wasn't a Toronto police officer and he was a Brinks security guard or a security guard that might be working at the bank or a jewelry store or a McDonald's, that jury would have convicted him of murder.
What do you think was going through Sammy Yatim's mind at that time? He was threatening a police officer, like that, and also what was going through James Forcillo's mind at the time? Was he scared, do you think, or was he just a testosterone-filled man? Let's
split it up into first Sammy Yatim. He actually wasn't threatening the police officer, so just to have it right, I understand why you think that because he's carrying a knife. His threatening were to the other people on the streetcar and to a young woman that he held the knife to. They all got off the streetcar. All Sammy Yatim did is hold the knife. He never threatened a police officer. He never said, "Officer, you come near me, I'm going to cut you, stab you." And these are things that people do say. So it's very important that people remember, because this young man is dead. He can't defend what he's doing, and I can't read his mind. But there was a theory that the defense wanted to say that Sammy Yatim was trying to commit suicide by cop. Do you know what that is? Somebody is so mentally ill or so depressed, it's very tough for people to kill themselves. That's why suicide is so hard. But a lot of people, particularly in the United States, they'll create a situation because they don't have the ability to kill themselves, just it's human preservation. They will act up in a way that police officers are provoked into shooting them. So you die, but it's suicide by cop. It's a terrible thing. Some people say that's what Sammy Yatim was doing, and he got his wish. That's what the defense lawyer said. Even if that was true, it's still disgusting that a Toronto police officer would shoot. That's when you call for an ambulance, a nurse, a doctor, so long as James Forcillo's life is not in danger. So to the second part of your question, what's James Forcillo thinking? To me, he got to the witness box and he lied. He said Sammy Yatim is going to come off the streetcar. He was moving forward. I thought I was in danger. I thought I was not going to go home to my family. I'm going to use nice language. It was all horse manure. Unfortunately, the jury bought half of it, but again, they wouldn't have bought it if it was me on the stand, or you on the stand, or her dad on the stand, or his dad on the stand. It's because he was a cop, period.
So, Ari, where are we now?
So it's really interesting, Alicia. You know, most people watching this know that when a jury comes back with a verdict, it's a unanimous verdict, they say guilty, and the judge will come into the courtroom thereafter and sentence somebody. Not complicated. This case, which is so unique, continues to be unique because right after the jury said guilty of attempted murder, the Crown got their conviction. But what did the defense do? The defense says they're going to seek a stay. What that means in simple English is that they are going to say that the verdict should not stand, that the jury's verdict should be thrown out. Why? Their position, as eye-rolling as it is to me, but these are very good lawyers, is that because the state trained the police officer to be a police officer, the state, i.e. the court system, shouldn't be allowed to convict him and put him in jail. The other part of it is in terms of the length of jail he's going to get. There's a minimum in law of attempted murder using a firearm. The minimum is 5 years. That's what James Forcillo is looking at. But the defense team is also saying that that is unconstitutional because attempt murder with a firearm, the minimum of 5 years, should apply to somebody using a gun in the course of a drug deal or gang banging or something illegal like that, not a police officer acting theoretically in the line of his duty. I don't think that's an argument that's going to win because the jury said you're acting in the line of your duty up until the attempted murder charge where there was no excuse, as we talked about those 6 bullets. So I think he's going to jail for 5 years. A lot of people on his side say he shouldn't go into jail. A lot of people on my side or others say he should be going to jail longer than 5 years because he took Sammy Yatim's life. That's where we are right now.
So what can be changed so that something like this doesn't happen again?
So this is the more important part of the conversation about the Sammy Yatim trial, which is the police have given lip service. And what I mean by lip service is you say all the right things, you get the right reports, you spend $1 million on lawyers and consultants to say, don't shoot people who are mentally ill, don't do this, de-escalate, use pepper spray, use tasers. Hopefully this sends a message to police officers, not to the public. Because the public should know, don't ever disobey a police officer, do what they say so you don't get shot, and then call a lawyer after and do it. But to a police officer, this might make the next police officer rolling up on a mentally ill person or an emotionally disturbed person think twice because they know that if they're trigger happy, now all of a sudden we have a precedent where a police officer could be charged. So the moral of the story is to police, I think, try everything else that you can before firing your gun, and if we have to put rubber bullets in guns or use sock kind of bullets, let's do it. But Sammy Yatim should still be alive if policies were followed.
Thank you, Ari, for talking with us.
My pleasure, Lisa. You asked great questions.
Thank you. So what do you think? Do you think James Forcillo should have been charged with how he was charged? Do you think Sammy Yatim should be alive today? Do you think that the justice system in our country is fair? Thank you for joining.